All right. So good morning and welcome to the first episode of the Garage Woodcarver. This is going to be the first in what I hope to be many episodes on wood carving and woodworking in general, joinery and furniture making. But I'm going to start off with wood carving, and today's lesson is going to be on wood carving chisels. Pretty much what you need, what the different types are, and kind of what you need to get started. So this is just a small sample of some carving tools that I have, and I'll talk about how they differ and different uses for them. So just got a piece of pine here, right? Pine really not much good for carving, other than seeing how sharp your chisels are, and just kind of for demonstration purposes today. But so anyhow, diving right in. Wood carving chisels. There's over like 1,000 different varieties. They probably don't make that many anymore, but there used to be about 1,000 different patterns that were made. So basically, we have 3 different ways that they vary, right? They vary based on size. So this is just a straight, flat chisel, sharpened on both sides, as you can see. With wood carving chisels, they're sharpened on both sides when they're flat. And so the size is really dependent. Both of these are considered a number 1. I'll talk about the numbering here in a minute. But these are both flat chisels, sharpened with a bevel on both sides, a fairly steep angle, or shallow angle, I should say. Right, so this is about a 1/4 inch, this is about 1 inch chisel. So that's the first way they vary, is basically the size of the chisel. So you can get them from anywhere from like a 1/16 of an inch to anywhere up to like 2 inches wide for more robust uses, more sculptural sort of things. So that's the first way they vary. The second way they vary is based on the sweep of the chisel. So I talked about the number 1, right? The number 1 being this flat chisel. And so just for comparison, here's another number 1. This is probably about a 5/8 chisel. And we put that into the wood. I'll take a little chip out here so you can see. And there you go. That's a flat chisel, flat number 1. So the numbering goes from number 1, which is dead flat, all the way up to number 11. And actually goes beyond that, but we're not going to worry about that for right now. What we're going to concentrate on are the 1 through 11, which is kind of the general sweeps. And this is more for when you're ordering chisels or buying them. Usually they'll be described as a 5/8 inch number 1. Okay, so you kind of know what you're getting. You know if it's number 1 sweep, it's going to be a flat chisel. And then likewise, so going from number 1 to number 2, number 2 is actually going to be. I'll take a chip out of this so you can see. And it's kind of one of those, I'm not putting a clamp on this, just so you can kind of see what's going on. So I can take it up and down off the bench. But normally I'd clamp this down with a couple of my handy C-clamps here. So anyhow, 1, 2, and then just for comparison's sake, number 11. Okay, so this is a number 11, which is a very deep U-shaped gouge. Right, so I'm gonna put that on the other side here. I'll take, kind of going straight down into wood just to make the impression so that you can see what that section looks like. Right, and that's a number 11. So starting with the number 1, moving to number 2, and then this is probably another number 2. This would be considered a fishtail number 2. Moving up to a number 3, which is slightly more curved. Let's see if we can find another 3. Yeah, so that's that right there. Number 3, you can see the curvature is beginning to increase. Go to a number 4. And again, keep in mind that all of these that if I have a number 4 from the same manufacturer, so this is a number 4, The idea being that if I have this number 4 and a number 4 from the same manufacturer, that sweep is actually going to match. So this is actually a little shallower. This is a number 5, but again, it's a different manufacturer. So each manufacturer has their kind of their own idea of what a number 4 is or a number 5. But generally speaking, the lower the number, so number 5, the lower the number, the flatter the sweep. Okay. And again, and some of the older ones actually aren't numbered, but we're just going to kind of work our way up here. We have. This is probably a number 5. Again, you can look at the sweep here. This is quite an old chisel. So number 5. Again, sweep's getting deeper. And here's another number 5. So we can see probably about the same. It's actually, when I go to put it in the same cut that I just made, it actually doesn't quite fit. So it's actually a little steeper. It's probably more like a number 6. But again, that's that slight variation in between the makers. So again, so moving up, this is probably a number 6. This is one that I made. I repurposed from another chisel. I think this was like a short bent chisel. I'll talk about those later. But it was a chisel that I didn't really use, so I decided to make a little project out of making it into something that would be more useful. And then, so that's a number 6. Here's another number 6. Again, it's going to be, so that's a number 6. And that's that indentation that I just did. A little chip out of there. Moving up to a number 7. So you kind of get the picture, right? We're the higher the number, the steeper, or the more curved that section is going to be. So again, that was a number 7. Let's start a new row here. And this is probably a number 8 or a 9. Again, this isn't an exact science, and it's not really too useful when you're actually using the chisels, because you're not going to be looking at the chisels and looking for that little number, you know, whatever it is, the number 8 that's stamped on there. I'd be like, oh yeah, I need a number 8 that's in this particular size. What you're going to be doing is, you know, kind of once you get to know your chisels, you'll be looking for that one that you know fits that particular sweep that you're trying to create. And again, this is number 8 or 9. You can see that it's getting steeper. And again, doesn't matter about the width when it comes to that designation, number 8, 9. It's really the section of the gouge, how curved it is. Okay, so that'd be an example of a number 8 that's you know, the same as that number 8, you know, same curvature. That's actually probably a number 9. So just to give you an example here, here's 2 number 9s, right? This one is a Austrian-made, Swiss-made chisel, and this is an old Addis one that I have. So again, they're both number 9s, but this one is about an 1/8 inch, and this one is about 1.5 inches, probably 30 millimeter with their markings. So again, just moving up to number 10. This one's probably about 1/4 inch, number 10. And you can see the section's increasing. So you probably get the point, right? The only real difference, right, once we get into the number 11s, is that sometimes on the number 11s, the sides of the actual chisel, and this one I have is really pronounced. If you can see that, the sides of the chisel almost come straight up, and then there's a deep U shape in the center. So typically a number 11, you're not going to be able to take it, and just to demonstrate, I'll take this number 8, and just show most other chisels, except for the number 1, of course, which is a flat chisel, you're going to be able to take it and transcribe a circle with it. So you can see I just went around in a circle with that. So pretty much all these chisels you're going to be able to do that with, and they're going to make varying sizes of circles if you come around with it, around all the way. So again, see. So, but once you get into the number 11, because the sides are up that high, you're not going to be able to actually do that because the sides are actually going to interfere. So they're going to start cutting into the center of that circle. So, and you can see the marks that are left here by those wings as they come around, right? So that's generally what the numbering means when it comes to wood carving chisels. And you don't need one of every size like that. You don't need like one, you know, because it gets really expensive really fast. All you need are probably about 8 to 10 chisels to get you started in a general size that's probably, you know, something like this, about 5/8 inch. That's generally what you want to get started with. So those are the general sizes, right? Going from number 1, you know, to 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6, getting steeper, 7, and then 8, 9, and then 10 and 11. And 11 are going to be very, very U-shaped chisels. So that's your general. The other way that chisels differ is, right, there's sections. So we have the size, which is like the width across the cutting edge, and then we have the section, which is the curvature at the cutting edge. And then we have the general shape. And most chisels that you're going to find are going to be in this shape, which is generally just considered a straight chisel, right? Its sides are pretty much parallel to each other. It does flare a little bit, but from the shoulder or bolster here, it does flare a little bit, but generally it's parallel. So that when you're sharpening it, you know, if you wind up sharpening it down, it's still going to retain the same width, you know, until you get down to here. But it's going to take, you know, years to actually sharpen down that far. So that's the general one, right? The straight chisel, and then we have what's called a fishtail chisel because it flares out. So it generally has a shaft that's kind of square in section, and then it kind of midway along that it'll start flaring out, and that's the general shape of most of these fishtail chisels that I have. They have that square section, they start to flare from there. Okay. And then there's also what's considered you can see these two, they start flaring right from the shoulder of the chisel itself. So it starts flaring here, and these are called a long spade chisel or a allongée, and that's French, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. So anyhow, but you can see it starts to flare right from the shoulder. These are quite nice to use. It's easy to get your hand around it. You can get into corners. That's really the advantage of it, is because these acute corners you have on either side enable you to get into tight corners and remove wood where a regular straight chisel would probably bind up, because that's just a 90-degree corner right there. Okay. So you got straight chisels, you got fishtail chisels, and then just to make it a little more interesting, this is kind of a separate category. It would be the skew chisel, which is really just a straight chisel, but it's sharpened at an angle. And this is really used for like getting into deep corners where you can't get in. And again, this is sharpened with a bevel on both sides, equal bevel on both sides. Okay, so that's a skew chisel. And again, those can vary in width, right? There's a skew, here's a skew. All right, so the next ones you have are going to be your front bent chisels, and there's kind of two different types of front bent. You have short front bent, which is kind of sometimes referred to as a spoon chisel, and then you have the long bent front chisel, front bent chisel. So you can see that has that long bend in the shaft of the chisel, and typically these are used for pretty much the same same purpose, and that is getting into a portion of a carving that is lower than the surrounding areas. So basically, here's just a lid from my toolbox, but if I wanted to get into an area, say here on the ground, and I couldn't reach it with a straight chisel, because if I get in here with a straight chisel, it's going to actually come and bind up, and it's going to want to dig straight down. Whereas with this chisel, because of that spoon shape, you're going to be able to get in there, and the force of the chisel is actually kind of this motion. You're actually pushing with your fingertips and controlling the handle with your other arm. So, short bent chisel. The long bend is kind of the same deal, more for sweeping cuts. It does this pretty much the same thing. Anything you do, you can do with a short bent, or anything you do with a long bend, you can do with a short bend, right? So you don't really need these, because any area where that's going to get in, you can get in with the short bend, right? And use it to do the same purpose. So I would recommend staying away from buying these. Sometimes you get these in sets and stuff. And I'm gonna do another video on actually buying chisels and how to refurbish them. But generally stay away from these unless you're doing really kind of specialized bowls or something like that. So anyhow, those are the two types of bends, long bend and short bend. And then we have back bend, just to make it a little more confusing, right? So a back bent chisel is kind of going to be used for the same purpose. You can see that as opposed to a front bent chisel, which is this one, the back bent is bent in the opposite direction. And typically these are used, instead of carving a groove, you're going to flip it around and carve a convex shape. So that's how that's utilized, and it allows you to make that clearance. So for relief carving, areas where you're trying to really get into some tight corners, that's where those are going to come in handy. And I don't have any of them, but there's also the front bent, and there's front bent skews, which is basically, it would be as if this chisel were sharpened pretty much at an angle across the front here. So if you sharpen that like that, and that they typically come in a right hand or a left hand, and that's getting into that tight corner. It's kind of a specialized tool. You're not going to use it for a lot of things, and typically I find I can use other tools to accomplish the same thing without having to actually buy a set of front bent skews. So that's pretty much it when it comes to wood carving tools. So again, just to kind of rehash what I was talking about, you have the width of the tool, you have the section of the tool, right? And then you have the actual shape of the tool, which is straight or fishtail, front bent, long bent, all that stuff. And that is pretty much it. So, one thing I forgot, V-tools. So a V-tool is shaped named because it is shaped like a V. And there's these are just a couple, they're pretty close. Typically the angle that this V is probably about a 60 degree, but there are some other ones that have a steeper angle depending on what you're doing. And this is something that typically I'll use just pop a clamp on here. Typically I'll use with a mallet. But what a V-tool does is basically it carves an incised line. Start over here. Okay. So anyhow, let's see that little S curve right there. So what it essentially is two straight chisels that are joined at the bottom with a tiny little U. So it's not exactly a V, it's a kind of a U at the bottom. And these are a little tricky to sharpen. Stay tuned for another video. We're going to talk all about sharpening the V-tool, because this gives people a lot of problems. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed the video. Just a little primer on wood carving tools. we're going to get into using them and doing some carvings in future videos, and hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned.